The cattle herd is our greatest asset, the lifeblood of our ranch. But in recent days, I have felt a constant sense of anxiety as wild hog tracks began appearing everywhere inside the grazing pastures. These animals do more than tear up the fields and contaminate water sources. More dangerously, they can carry a wide range of devastating infectious diseases. Every time I see the cattle grazing peacefully near wallows and droppings left behind by wild hogs, my heart tightens with worry. It only takes one disease outbreak to destroy years of hard work. There is no time to waste. I have to act immediately to capture every wild hog and restore a safe buffer zone around the family's livestock. Early in the morning, I hurried into the pasture to inspect the first trap inside the cattle ranch. Seeing that the trap had been triggered and was holding several wild hogs, I felt relieved but remained focused. I quickly connected the transfer chute from the trap cage to the truck. While I was working under pressure, the curious cattle began approaching the trap cage. My heart raced as I worried that the cattle might panic or damage the gate mechanism. Keeping an eye on the livestock while dealing with aggressive wild hogs required all of my strength and patience. After a tense struggle, the final hog was successfully loaded onto the truck. Continuing along the pasture boundary, I stopped to inspect the next trap, which was already packed with wild hogs. Looking at the crowded trap, I felt both frustration and relief. I immediately used a stick and loud shouts to guide the hogs neatly into the truck. Near the edge of the forest, I began setting up another trap to block a newly discovered route of entry. Just as expected, the sensor alerted me that the trap had been triggered during the night. I returned the following morning to inspect it. Inside, a pair of large wild hogs had become extremely agitated, repeatedly slamming into the steel panels. Even so, thanks to experience and patience, the hogs were successfully loaded onto the truck. At another high-risk trap location, I checked the trap early in the morning. Concerned about the disease risks posed by the captured animals, I proceeded to remove all of the wild hogs from the trap to ensure maximum safety, then exhaustively loaded them onto the truck. The highlight of the day came when I arrived at the next oversized trap. A large number of wild hogs were crowded inside. The sight was both overwhelming and exciting. After quickly connecting the transfer chute to the truck, the hogs began moving into the vehicle. Only a few minutes later, dozens of hogs were packed tightly inside the truck compartment. Finally, I moved on to inspect the last trap. To my surprise, an entire family group of wild hogs had been captured. After patiently guiding them for some time, they finally entered the truck one by one. The warm afternoon sun stretched across the green pasture. The cattle had returned to grazing peacefully, no longer startled or uneasy. Leaning against the truck cab, I looked at the securely locked trailer filled with captured wild hogs and felt an enormous weight lifted from my shoulders. For now, the threat of a disease outbreak had been contained, and peace had returned to the cattle ranch. The battle against wild hogs demanded sweat, hard work, and courage, but as I watched the healthy livestock grazing safely in the field, I knew every effort had been worth it. That sound always begins in the middle of the night. The crack of dry branches snapping apart. The sound of roots being violently torn from the ground again and again. And the sharp snap of barbed wire fences breaking under the force of wild boars. The farmer can only listen helplessly as thousands of dollars vanish into the darkness. The moment we received the report, we, the rapid response specialists from the Texas Wildlife Management Agency, set out immediately. In the back of the truck was the game-changer trapping system. Without wasting any time, the whole team immediately began checking every footprint and every patch of torn-up soil to trace the movement of the herd. The first trap location was a narrow, dry creek bed, where the tight terrain made a small modular trap the only possible option. The signal flashed. Through the infrared camera, the entire herd had entered the trap, completely absorbed in eating the bait. After one deep, controlled breath, my finger pressed the trigger without hesitation, and the heavy steel gate slammed shut, tearing through the silence of the night. Not stopping at the first result, we continued checking the system and quickly shifted to the next target. The herd had already entered, but a few large males still hesitated outside, snorting and sensing something unusual in the wind. Waiting meant the boars inside would finish eating and leave, but acting immediately would allow the ones outside to escape. There was no perfect choice. I tightened my hand and decisively pressed the drop trap command. The gate slammed shut instantly. The boars outside vanished into the darkness in panic within seconds, while inside the cage, chaos erupted violently. Heavy bodies crashed wildly in every direction, slamming into the steel frame like waves hitting rock. The third trap point, deep inside the forest, had movement. The exhaustion disappeared instantly. This area was completely different because the wild boars here reacted with extreme aggression when cornered, forcing us to deploy a large circular trap. No sharp corners, no pressure points. The camera screen lit up, clearly showing a large herd gathering beneath the feeder, each one stepping inside without the slightest suspicion. The decisive moment had arrived. Both drop gates were triggered at the same time. The boars froze for a split second before their wild instincts took over. They ran in circles, colliding and crushing against each other, creating a sound of hooves mixed with violently shaking metal. Near the orchard, the boars here were extremely intelligent. They feared narrow entrances. Traditional drop gates became useless. The best solution this time was 2 fully suspended cage traps. No doors, no walls, No visible danger. The herd slowly moved in, cautious and suspicious, finding nothing unusual. The moment the last sow crossed the line, the drop command was confirmed. The entire heavy steel frame dropped freely to the ground. The boars jumped in terror, crashing wildly into everything in complete panic. But the solid steel structure held them in place. The gamble was over, and this time, we won completely. But did you know, behind every successful trap closure is an entire system calculated down to the smallest detail. We use flexible steel modules. Steel mesh is locked together with quick pins, and anchor stakes are driven several feet deep to withstand the force of hundreds of pounds of impact. During the first days, bait is scattered everywhere, so the herd loses suspicion. On the decisive night, the bait is placed only in the farthest corner inside the trap, forcing them to push their entire bodies into the fully secured zone. Only when technology and psychology work together perfectly can we reclaim peace for the fields. The moment we arrived at the site and stood beside the steel mesh, we could truly see how terrifying they were. Massive blocks of muscle, skin thick like armor. They carried diseases that threatened both livestock and native wildlife. Without allowing the herd's panic to continue any longer, we immediately carried out the final step of the process. Every handling procedure was done right there, from outside the trap. No unnecessary, prolonged panic.
Yep, it's probably slick. Yep. You hear him in there?
Every wild boar captured is not simply another number on a report. It means fields saved, irrigation systems no longer destroyed, and an entire ecosystem protected from silent devastation. If you want to witness more fast-paced and intense control operations like this, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next video. Three long months under the blazing sun and pouring rain, carefully nurturing every green shoot and tending every row of cassava and corn with endless sweat and hope. Yet in just one night, all the hard work of a Texas farmer was reduced to a devastated battlefield. A sounder of feral hogs mercilessly tore through the fields, rooting up the soil and trampling leaves and stalks into ruins just to dig out a few tender roots beneath the ground. Looking at the destroyed farmland, the farmer's heart sank with grief. This was no longer an ordinary effort to stop crop damage. It had become a campaign of retribution to protect their livelihood and defend the pride of those who live by the land. To deal with these destructive animals that had grown accustomed to raiding crops, Nick knew anger would solve nothing. He began the operation with a patient baiting strategy. First, he scattered sweet corn around the trap site every day without setting the trap, allowing the feral hogs to develop a natural feeding routine and gradually lose their caution. When the timing was right, the trap was finally set and activated. The feral hogs filed into the enclosure one after another, to feast on the bait without the slightest suspicion. Snap! The trap slammed shut with absolute precision. Nick immediately arrived and quickly dispatched the destructive feral hogs, bringing this group's rampage across the farmland to an end. At another corner of the property bordering the woods, Nick set another trap and spread fresh bait. The feral hogs were soon drawn in by the sweet scent of food. As darkness fell, the smart trap activated automatically, allowing him to capture the entire sounder of cunning feral hogs. The battle reached its climax late that night. Through a thermal imaging camera, Nick watched the massive corral trap slam shut in the darkness. Early the next morning, he rushed to the scene. To handle such a large group of feral hogs, Nick began installing a sloped wire mesh loading chute that connected the trap directly to the bed of his pickup truck. After relentless pressure, the panicked feral hogs finally ran straight through the chute and successfully loaded into the truck. To save time, Nick launched a drone to survey the ranch and discovered another sounder of feral hogs had already been caught in the next trap. However, the moment Nick approached the trap with his utility vehicle, the trapped animals became extremely agitated, repeatedly ramming the steel panels while letting out loud grunts. The roar of the engine only frightened them further, sending them racing around the enclosure in search of an escape. All that remained for Nick and his team was to quickly secure the animals before heading home. In addition to capturing entire sounders, Nick also had to deal with the most cunning and aggressive solitary hogs. In a field of tall grass, he spread corn to lure in a true monster of the night. The result was astonishing as he successfully trapped a gigantic boar. After repeatedly slamming into the steel cage, the boar had injured its snout, leaving it bloodied and extremely aggressive, ready to charge anyone who came near. Remaining calm, Nick skillfully used food to lure the boar into a smaller holding cage, then safely loaded the massive boar onto his truck. At another trap near a cornfield, Nick discovered a large solitary feral hog caught inside. He carefully connected the trap to a portable holding cage, guided the feral hog into the smaller cage for easier handling, then pushed the cage onto the bed of his pickup truck. Finally, for the last stubborn feral hog, Nick carefully backed his pickup truck into position to connect the wire mesh loading chute directly to the trap. With just a few firm movements to drive it forward, the feral hog ran straight up into the truck bed safely and cleanly. Beneath the brilliant golden sun of the Texas plains, the sound of the pickup truck carrying its hard-earned catch gradually faded into the horizon. Looking back at the fields that had been ripped apart, Nick knew that losses were an unavoidable part of choosing a life tied to this rugged land. Yet the greatest lesson from this cleanup operation was the unbreakable spirit of the farmer. 3 months of hard work can be destroyed in a single night, but no wild animal can ever crush the human will. Through careful preparation, patient trapping, and courage during close encounters, farmers can clear their land of these destructive invaders, restore the rich green landscape of their ranches, and continue planting the next season's abundant harvests. The night wind sweeps across fields that have just been torn apart. The fresh tracks and the still moist soil reveal that the wild boars passed through not long ago. In Texas, these feral hogs are notoriously difficult to control. They're strong, omnivorous, travel in groups, and reproduce rapidly. Just one night of letting down your guard can be enough for an entire season's harvest to be destroyed. That is why tonight, we are here to set traps and take proactive measures to control them before the damage spreads even further. Two traps are set several hundred meters apart in an open woodland in Texas, right beside the fields that have been torn up over the past several days. We are in no hurry. We know that with the scent of food leading the way, following their natural feeding habits, the wild boars will come. Night falls quickly. Close to midnight, the first trap suddenly slams shut. The sharp clang of metal echoes through the quiet night. Inside, the trapped wild boar reacts violently during the first few minutes. It charges around the cage, desperately searching for a way out. But before long, its survival instincts take over. It realizes that struggling will only drain its strength. The animal gradually becomes still, conserving its energy while watching its surroundings. That same night, we receive word from our teammates that the second trap nearby has also been triggered. Another wild boar has been captured. The following morning, as we inspect the trap, we find a large wild boar standing before us, powerfully built and incredibly strong. Just looking at the marks surrounding the trap is enough to understand how hard it fought to escape during the night. But this method is clearly proving effective, and this is only the beginning. After the first night, we decide to change our strategy to increase our success. Larger traps are moved into position, ones capable of capturing an entire sounder at once. Because if we catch them one by one, the rest of the group will become much more cautious. Just as expected, everything happens much faster on the second night. On the surveillance camera, a group of wild boars appears, a sow followed by a large litter of piglets. They calmly feed along the bait trail we have laid out and slowly make their way deeper into the trap. Just a few minutes later, the entire group is inside. The trap door suddenly crashes shut. Bang! The group immediately falls into chaos. The sound of metal crashing against metal echoes through the quiet Texas night. But the trap is completely sealed. There is no escape. Success. The next morning, we are greeted by the sight of an entire group of wild boars inside the trap. The sow and all of her young are safely contained. Even so, we know that a few faster ones managed to turn back into the forest. And the story is far from over. After 2 nights, we have gained a much clearer understanding of the remaining group's travel routes. Wild boars have one very obvious weakness. They are incredibly driven by food. If the food is placed in the right location, they will return. So we continue monitoring them through surveillance cameras and identify the familiar trails they regularly use. The final 2 traps are placed directly along those routes. On the monitor, movement appears quite late in the night. A smaller group, the survivors from the previous night, slowly approaches the trapping area. They are more cautious. They stop. They sniff the air. They scan their surroundings. But in the end, their instinct to feed pushes them forward. One by one, they walk into the trap. The decisive moment has arrived. From a distance, we press the button. The trap door instantly slams shut. The wild boars scatter in panic inside the enclosure. For a few brief minutes, the atmosphere inside the trap becomes tense and chaotic, but everything is quickly brought under control. The next morning, we return to inspect the traps together. It turns out that David, our teammate, also successfully captured 2 wild boars in the trap on the other side the previous night. Watching them continue to ram the cage in a desperate attempt to escape, we know that our mission for this operation has been accomplished. After 3 consecutive nights of careful tracking and precisely placed traps, our efforts have paid off with remarkable results. This area has finally been brought under control. Even so, we remain fully aware that a few fortunate wild boars are still out there, and this effort is far from over. The battle against invasive wild boars in Texas has entered its most critical stage, as their population exploded beyond control, directly threatening the survival of the entire farm ecosystem. Nick knew he could no longer rely on small-scale solutions. An unprecedented large-scale operation was planned. 196 wild boars, the hidden destroyers that had constantly terrorized the cornfields, were now in his sights. The fate of this entire aggressive herd would be decided completely and swiftly in the blink of an eye by smart technological traps and the unwavering determination of a Texas farmer. The operation began with choosing the right location and setting up the battlefield. Under the midday sun of Texas, Nick and his partner carefully installed a strong steel cage trap in an open area near a water source. The scent of sweet corn spread through the air, attracting the entire herd of wild boars as they moved in without any suspicion. In a split second, when the leading boar touched the trigger sensor, the trap slammed shut with tremendous force. The wild boars trapped inside immediately became frantic, repeatedly crashing into the steel walls in an attempt to escape, but it was already too late. The hunter's instinct told him that tonight would be a busy night. The camera system sent an alert that another large trap placed in the central field had been successfully triggered in the darkness of the night. Early the next morning, Nick immediately arrived to inspect the scene and decisively took down the dangerous wild boars trapped inside the cage. The number was overwhelming, forcing him to work hard loading the wild boars on the truck bed and transporting them home for processing. To cover thousands of acres of land, Nick sent a drone soaring into the sky for aerial surveillance. From a control screen, he discovered that the first cage trap at the edge of the valley had already been activated. He drove his specialized pickup truck quickly toward the trap location. There, Nick skillfully connected a strong steel mesh tunnel system to guide the wild boars directly from the cage trap into the back of the truck. From the drone's aerial view, the sight of the entire herd packed tightly inside the trap was truly overwhelming. With several decisive methods to drive them forward, Nick successfully guided the entire line of wild boars through the sloped tunnel and straight onto the truck. The nightmare for the wild herd continued at another defensive position. The third large cage trap had also automatically closed during the previous night. When the sun rose higher, Nick carried out an on-site inspection. He quickly took down all the aggressive wild boars trapped inside to protect his farm. Besides dealing with entire herds, the fiercest battles always came from massive solitary male boars filled with strength and cunning. Approaching a single trap hidden deep along a dense trail, Nick discovered an enormous male wild boar roaring violently inside. When the hunter appeared, the thick-maned beast with long, sharp tusks became extremely agitated, violently charging and smashing into the steel walls. To deal with this stubborn animal, Nick reversed his truck and connected a smaller mobile holding cage directly to the trapdoor. After a tense battle of patience and strategy, he managed to lure the wild boar into the smaller cage. Using a pulley system, he lifted the heavy steel cage containing the massive beast onto the truck safely for transportation back home. The final stage of the operation ended at a field covered with tall, dense grass. The trap placed there had successfully captured another herd of wild boars. Nick's approach once again caused the wild boars to become extremely aggressive. After completing this final capture, Nick transported the results of a long and exhausting day back home. At the storage area, he carefully cleaned and processed the firm meat, preparing it to become nutritious and delicious meals for his family. Under the golden sunset stretching across the endless cornfields of wild Texas, the sound of the meat processing machines gradually faded, bringing an end to a demanding day of work. Looking at the 196 wild boars that had been completely removed from a farm, Nick felt no cruelty or pride of a conqueror. Instead, what remained was a deep sense of relief and peace. The fate of the wild herd that had destroyed crops was decided in the blink of an eye through careful preparation, advanced technology, and the unwavering determination of a resilient farmer. This long and challenging battle to protect the land delivered a valuable lesson. No matter how harsh or powerful the wilderness may be, it will eventually yield before human persistence, creativity, and a tireless spirit of hard work that refuses to give up. From now on, the farm can finally regain the peace it once had and prepare to welcome new seasons of abundant harvests. If one night an entire herd of wild boars suddenly stormed into your farm, what would you do? Not just a few scattered animals, but a massive group moving together, destroying everything in their path. That is exactly the situation I'm facing. I specialize in handling and controlling invasive wild boar populations. And this time, the problem is no longer as simple as before. The tracks they left behind showed something alarming. Not only are they growing in number, they've also become far more cautious and unpredictable. So how do you stop an entire herd at once? Will these traps be enough to hold them? Or will they be the ones outsmarting me instead? I started by placing the trap directly along the clearest trail the herd regularly used. The steel cage was secured tightly, and bait was carefully scattered deeper inside, step by step, to make everything feel as natural as possible. Everything had to be perfect, because even the smallest unusual sign would keep them from entering. As night fell, the area sank into silence. But not long after, the herd appeared. They followed the scent of food and slowly moved into the trap. Then the gate slammed shut. The sound echoed sharply through the darkness. Instantly, the entire herd erupted into chaos, crashing violently inside the cramped space, desperately searching for a way out. The next morning, we couldn't afford to wait any longer. As soon as daylight broke, the whole team headed straight for the trap location. Even from a distance, we could already hear the noise coming from inside. As we approached, the wild boars were still reacting aggressively. Without wasting time, we immediately began the collection process, controlling each step carefully to remove the entire group quickly and decisively. The next trap was placed right along the forest edge, an area where the wild boars regularly emerged each night to feed. Everything was prepared quickly before we left, allowing the trap to sit quietly in the darkness. That night, the trap was triggered. The next morning, the moment I returned, I realized the situation was far more serious than the previous captures. The number of wild boars packed inside was enormous. They filled the entire cage, shoving against one another, moving violently, constantly slamming into the steel frame. The atmosphere instantly became tense. There were simply too many. We needed a way to handle them quickly and efficiently. A bulldozer was brought in, slowly approaching the trap while the herd inside continued thrashing violently. Every movement had to be calculated carefully. One group at a time, they were loaded onto the transport vehicle. The third trap was placed along the western edge of the forest, where the herd frequently traveled out to feed before returning deeper into the woods. After everything was set, I left the trap overnight, and just as expected, they entered and triggered it under the cover of darkness. The next morning, when I returned, the situation was obvious immediately. Inside, the herd was trapped tightly together, moving frantically within the confined space. This time, there were no machines to assist us. Everything had to be done manually. I handled it one step at a time, carefully, decisively. There was no room for mistakes. Each animal was controlled and collected by hand. It took far longer, but it ensured everything stayed under control. When the final boar was removed from the trap, silence slowly returned to the area once again. Another location completed exactly as planned. The fourth trap was placed deep inside a clearing surrounded by dense pine forest, a hidden location enclosed by thick rows of trees. Everything was prepared carefully before we left. But this time, the night camera malfunctioned, meaning none of the events during the night were recorded. The next morning, when we returned, the atmosphere already felt different. Even from far away, I could sense something was wrong. And as we approached the trap, the sight in front of us genuinely stopped me cold. Inside were not ordinary wild boars. These were massive animals, huge bodies, heavy movements filled with raw power. The trap itself looked smaller than ever as they shoved against its steel frame. Every movement created deep, heavy sounds echoing through the silent forest. When the final trap was finally cleared, the forest slowly returned to its natural silence. Looking back at everything that had happened, I knew this was no ordinary trapping operation. From massive herds to gigantic individuals hidden deep inside the woods, everything revealed one thing clearly. This area was far more complex than anything I'd faced before. We managed to regain control, but it was obvious. This would not be the last time. Looking at the deep furrows torn through the soil, the young corn stalks smashed and uprooted, and the precious water sources for livestock turned into muddy pools, any Texas farmer would shudder. The destructive power of invasive wild hogs goes far beyond the stories people tell. They do not destroy simply to feed. They leave devastation everywhere they roam. The widespread damage across Nick's ranch is undeniable proof of one question. Can wild hogs really be this destructive? To protect the lifeblood of his farm, Nick knows he must take stronger action than ever before. The counteroffensive begins as the sun slowly disappears behind the rolling Texas hills. At the first trap site along the edge of a dense woodland, Nick carefully spreads piles of fermented sweet corn, its strong scent drifting through the air to lure hungry wild hogs from their hiding places. At the same time, on the opposite side of the ranch near a dry creek bed, he finishes baiting another trap, preparing for another herd to wander in. As darkness blankets the ranch, the greedy hogs begin moving toward the bait. The smart trap sensors immediately spring into action. Within seconds, the first heavy steel gate slams shut in the middle of the night. Almost simultaneously, the second trap near the dry creek also closes successfully, sealing off the escape route for another group of hogs. Early the next morning, while thick fog still hangs over the fields, Nick starts his inspection route. His first stop is the trap hidden deep inside a wooded corner of the property. To save time and improve safety, he launches his drone to inspect another trap from above. From the aerial camera, the trapped hogs notice the unfamiliar movement overhead and immediately become highly agitated. Nick quickly drives in with his pickup truck, dispatches the dangerous invasive animals, and secures the trap to eliminate the threat. Without wasting a moment, he continues driving across the ranch to inspect more remote trap locations. After successfully loading another group of captured hogs onto the truck using his transport system, he heads straight for the next trap on his busy schedule. The operation becomes even more intense as the day continues. Motion alerts reveal that another trap hidden in a patch of tall grass was triggered overnight. Nick immediately drives to inspect it under the blazing Texas sun. The moment the trapped hogs spot him, they explode into frantic panic, charging the steel fencing and squealing loudly in desperation. With several carefully placed shots, Nick humanely dispatches the dangerous animals before loading an entire truck full of wild hogs for transport back to the ranch. At the Dry Creek location, Nick also arrives to inspect the second trap that had closed during the night. Working quickly, he efficiently transfers the captured hogs into his specially designed transport trailer. The final stage of the operation unfolds at the last two trap sites. Walking toward a trap near a cassava field, Nick finds another group of hogs in complete panic. They race frantically around the enclosure, searching for an escape as his hand reaches for the steel gate. Soon afterward, the entire group is efficiently loaded onto the transport truck. Returning to the first trap from earlier that morning, Nick and his partner begin the loading process by attaching a sturdy steel tunnel directly from the trap to the pickup truck. With a few firm guiding movements, they direct the entire sounder through the tunnel and safely into the transport vehicle, successfully completing another large capture before heading back home. As the brilliant red sunset stretches across the wide-open Texas plains, the angry squeals of wild hogs gradually fade into silence, giving way to the peace the ranch once enjoyed. Looking over the trucks filled with captured hogs and the fields finally free from relentless destruction, Nick feels not cruelty, but a deep sense of relief and quiet satisfaction. The destructive force of invasive wild hogs is truly astonishing, but human determination can be even stronger. Through patience, careful planning, advanced drone surveillance, and modern trapping systems, this Texas farmer has successfully protected the land he worked so hard to build. Once again, this battle for the ranch proves an important lesson. Only persistence, innovation, and the determination never to give up can safeguard both the land and the harvest that depend upon it. Looking at fields torn apart by deep furrows, fruit trees ripped out by the roots, and irrigation pipes chewed into pieces, the frustration of a Texas farmer had reached its breaking point. The destruction caused by invasive wild hogs was not only draining money and years of hard work, but also pushing farmers to the edge as they woke up each morning to find fresh damage across their land. Unable to stand by any longer, Nick decided to launch a large-scale operation, deploying his most advanced trapping systems in a determined effort to restore peace to his ranch. The campaign demanded careful preparation from the very beginning. Along the overgrown edges of the property, Nick used brush cutters and hand tools to clear thick grass and brush, creating open, level ground for installing heavy-duty steel corral traps. As night fell, the sweet scent of fermented corn began doing its job. At the main trap site near a sandy ridge, a large sounder of wild hogs was irresistibly drawn toward the bait, crossing the trap entrance without suspicion. Within seconds, the automatic trigger engaged, capturing an impressively large number of hogs inside the enclosure. Meanwhile, at another section of the ranch, a second group of destructive hogs had also been lured into a different trap during the night. The sharp clang of steel echoed through the darkness as the smart trap door slammed shut, sealing them inside. At first light, Nick started his morning inspection of the trap network. He arrived at the first trap shortly after sunrise. To transport such a large number of animals, he carefully connected a sturdy steel loading tunnel from the trap entrance directly to the bed of his pickup truck. The moment the hogs spotted him, they became highly agitated, charging repeatedly into the steel panels. After patiently guiding the animals, Nick successfully moved the entire group through the tunnel, completing the loading process safely. Nick then drove to the second trap location. His arrival once again triggered a frantic reaction from the trap hogs. To stop the ongoing destruction they had caused across the ranch, Nick quickly carried out the necessary harvesting procedures. At another large corral trap deeper inside the property, yet another sizable group of wild hogs had been successfully captured. Nick set up a professional loading system by connecting a portable holding cage directly to the trap entrance. He then carefully guided the hogs into the truck, completing another highly successful operation before resetting the trap for future use. As the day progressed, the operation became even more intense. Nick returned to the trap near the sandy ridge, where the large herd had been captured overnight. The moment he stepped out of the truck, the trap hogs erupted into frantic panic, charging the fence while letting out loud, aggressive squeals. Because of the danger they posed to both people and nearby livestock, Nick made the decision to humanely dispatch the animals to ensure safety. He then loaded the carcasses onto his truck for transport to the processing area. Next came the single catch trap positioned in the clearing he had prepared earlier. Although the trap had worked perfectly, this time it had captured only one clever boar that had slipped in to feed alone. Nick calmly connected a smaller portable holding cage to the main trap, then successfully guided the lone animal into the transport cage. The final operation of the day took place at a trap beside a cornfield. As the boar noticed Nick approaching, it panicked, charging around the enclosure while squealing loudly. Relying on years of experience, Nick carefully guided the animal onto the truck, successfully securing the final destructive animal before heading home. As the evening sun cast long shadows across the green fields of Texas, the deafening squeals of the wild hogs faded into silence, allowing peace to return to the ranch once again. Looking at the empty traps that had done their job so effectively and the trucks filled with the day's harvest, the tension on Nick's face finally gave way to a quiet smile of relief. The overwhelming frustration caused by relentless agricultural damage had finally been answered with determined action and meaningful results. Once again, the battle proved that no matter how destructive, intelligent, or aggressive invasive wild hogs may be, they cannot overcome careful planning, modern technology, unwavering determination, and the resilience of a hard-working Texas farmer. With the ranch finally secured, the land was once again ready for another promising growing season. I stood frozen in the middle of the cornfield, staring in disbelief at the vast 20-hectare stretch of land that had once been covered in lush green. Now, it looked like a battlefield left in ruins. Broken stalks lay scattered everywhere. The soil had been deeply churned up, and young ears of corn had been trampled into the mud. 20 hectares of crops. This was more than just a number on paper. It represented thousands of hours of labor under the scorching Texas sun, countless drops of sweat, tears, and the livelihood that had supported my family throughout the past year. Yet in just a few short nights, a ferocious herd of wild hogs had wiped it all away. A crushing sense of grief surged through my chest before erupting into unshakable anger. I clenched my fists and stared toward the dark tree line along the edge of the property. We Texas farmers had endured this destruction for far too long. There would be no more retreat and no more mercy. Today, we would launch a full-scale operation to hunt down these ruthless beasts. To tighten the net around the threatened 20 hectares of farmland, I couldn't afford to sit back and wait. I began the operation by driving along the forest trails, spreading miles of sweet corn bait to lure the wild hogs toward carefully selected trap locations. Soon afterward, under the blazing afternoon sun, my team and I hurried to install heavy-duty trapping pens in the open woodland. The pounding of hammers echoed through the trees as thick steel panels were firmly secured. When darkness fell, so did the nightmare. Just as expected, the scent of sweet corn drew the aggressive herd in. Through the infrared camera, I held my breath as dozens of massive dark figures poured into the trap. Clang! The loud mechanical snap shattered the silence of the night as the trap gate slammed shut, locking the entire herd inside. At the northern boundary, another trap slammed shut in the middle of the night. Near the dry creek, another trap closed after dark, cutting off the hog's escape route. Along the dense forest edge, another nighttime trap successfully captured another destructive group of wild hogs. At first light the following morning, while thick fog still covered the plowed fields, I started my pickup truck and began the long day's harvest under tremendous pressure. As I approached the first trap for inspection, the wild hogs inside immediately became violently agitated. They let out chilling squeals and repeatedly slammed their heads against the steel bars, shaking the entire cage. The lead boar glared at me with bloodshot eyes, looking ready to tear apart anyone who came too close. Although my heart was racing, I stayed completely calm as I carefully connected the transfer chute from the trap to the transport cage. After nearly 20 minutes of patience and determined guidance with a sorting pole, I successfully loaded the entire group onto the truck. Moving to the next trap site, I inspected the pen the following morning. The situation once again tested my patience. I quickly connected the loading chute and successfully transferred the captured wild hogs onto the truck. I continued checking traps and collecting captures at the dry creek early that morning, finishing the work quickly before heading to the next hotspot. At another large trap site, I was stunned to discover an enormous herd packed tightly inside the enclosure wall. Sweat poured down my face beneath the increasingly intense sun as my team and I worked tirelessly to load the animals onto the truck. We finally breathed a sigh of relief when the last wild hog stepped inside. As the truck slowly made its way toward the final trap hidden deep in the canyon for one last nighttime inspection, darkness had once again completely taken over. The truck's headlights swept across the brush, revealing a massive boar with a humped back and long razor-sharp tusks. Unlike the others, it showed no fear and made no attempt to flee. Instead, it planted its feet firmly into the ground, staring directly into my flashlight, ready to charge anything standing in its way. I carefully connected the loading chute leading directly into the truck, but this boar refused to give in. Every time I tried to guide it forward with the pole, it spun around, let out furious squeals, and slammed its tusks against the steel panels, producing terrifying metallic screeches. The psychological battle lasted nearly 40 minutes. Both the boar and I were completely exhausted. With unwavering patience, I gradually limited its movement until, after one final frustrated roar, it finally stepped onto the truck. The steel gate slammed shut behind it with a loud clang as the lock snapped securely into place. The heavily loaded truck roared to life and bounced along the red dirt road as it left the scene. Standing alone in the cool night breeze, I looked up at the endless Texas sky and finally released the long breath I had been holding since morning.